Alright everyone, the situation in Syria has deteriorated once again to where it was a couple of months ago. A couple of months ago, there's really no joint cooperation between the US and Russia. Trump made overtures, actually, sort of spoke with Putin and said, well, the air collision hotline needs to be set back up. They cut that off back when Obama was still in office because they couldn't work with him. Obama basically wanted to dick around over in the desert, hopefully. I guess he was hoping to just bomb Assad and kill him directly so he could destabilize that like he did Libya. So Trump took some tentative action, said, well, we're going to work together to attack ISIS. Yeah, we're kind of sort of still interested in attacking the Syrian forces, but, we're going to put that on the back burner. Now, though, a Syrian jet has been shot down by U.S. forces. Complicating the relationship and putting it right back where it was, right back at Cold War levels and cooperation between the US and Russia. You have overlapping active military zones in the region, and you no longer even have direct instant communication between the US and Russia on the whole dilemma, which means, as both sides run sorties, they could collide in midair or accidentally attack one another. Which would be a pretty severe situation. If the U.S. downing an Assad Syrian jet brings us back into that Cold War feeling on the battlefield, what would happen if accidentally a Russian fighter attacked U.S. forces or vice versa? Oh, it'd be a freak show diplomatically. It'd take years to repair the very fragile relationship that actually has begun once again for the first time in half a decade to exist at all. There are significant problems in this region, especially when you're talking about Syria. Now, Russia has now not only cut off that air collision hotline, but is threatening to at least track and possibly attack anything flying around west of the Euphrates River in this region. Basically, well, you need to get away from Assad's forces because we back Assad. Don't fucking care what you do to ISIS, but do it elsewhere. Get away from the zone that we're in control of with Assad and stop attacking the Syrian military, which is probably a good idea. I've been outspoken about this for some time. Assad, while he has some problems of his own, he is an authoritarian figure, even though technically Syria is a democracy. It's an authoritarian democracy, which is to say it's like Saddam or something. But as we saw with Saddam, who I would argue was morally speaking far worse than Assad will ever be. Assad has the support of much of his population in the areas where he controls. People prefer him, I guess, to ISIS. See, they see what happens. U.S. goes in, removes some authoritarian figure. Dictator, dictator-light, authoritarian democracy sort of figurehead. Doesn't really matter. We remove them in the name of liberation, in the name of fighting the war on terror, whatever. And things get 10 times worse. They take one look at Aleppo, and they realize why. Now, meanwhile, areas that are more solidly under Assad's control, they're doing fine. You look at pictures, they're still fully functioning. It's like Libya before Gaddafi went. Now, of course, Libya is a hellhole. Half of Syria is a hellhole. And the Russians are saying that part of Syria that's no longer a hellhole, that's now, solid and stable, you stay out of that zone because we don't trust you to, I mean, if you're shooting down a Syrian jet, we don't trust you. And the U.S. didn't come out and say, oh, sorry, that was an accident. We thought it was like ISIS had hijacked it or something, some cop-out. They said, no, fuck off. Get out of our zone. Now, what's the U.S., by the way, going to do? We dragged our heels on Syria. If we had wanted to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, the time to do something like that would have been before the Russians could get involved. A shock and awe-style campaign. Let everybody know we're going to go in. I wouldn't have supported it, but that would be the way to go about doing it. When you have this half-assed approach where you're, for years, funding Sharia law-loving, militants, the FSA, destabilizing things, ISIS moves in, then you're like, oh, well, we need to expand what we're doing because ISIS is here, and then you spend half your time bombing Assad's forces, even though he's trying to attack ISIS too. What was Russia supposed to do? The Iranians alone have just enough diplomatic leverage with Russia to say, can you please get involved on this one? We don't feel comfortable with this situation. Now there's nothing we can do. Areas that Assad controls, he's going to fucking continue to control. It doesn't matter if the U.S. wants him out. And if you get rid of Assad, it would start a huge diplomatic row that we would come out on the worst end of, probably, in all honesty. That's number one. Number 2, ISIS would expand further. Number 3, Assad would just get replaced anyway. They'd have somebody else who would basically be a Bashar al-Assad. They might be a lot worse, making us once again on the world stage look like ineffective bullies. We need to get out of this region. What we should be doing is working directly with the Russians. The problem for Trump specifically is that if he were to do that, if he were to say, yes, we're working with Russia now actively, hand in hand to destroy ISIS, and we're going to expand this beyond Syria, by the way, we're going to be working with Russia and Libya, we're going to restore order there, we're only going to focus on the militants. We don't really care what dictator or tribal group controls things as long as it's not ISIS. If they're willing to work to a halfway decent degree of niceness with both the US and Russia, we're all for it. Who fucking cares? We're killing ISIS members. If he were to do that, people would say, Russian collusion, no, he's a communist agent. He's going soft on the Russians. Meanwhile, he actually manages, through the auspices probably of Mattis, to degrade relations with Russia, whether this is an accident or a willful attempt on this Syrian fighter jet. He actually manages to denigrate that relationship at the same time that some in Congress are like, oh, well, we need to sanction the Russians. I don't even think we should. I don't think we should. Merkel aside, why bother? What's the fucking point? Our relationship with Russia is shit right now. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. And then meanwhile, the Europeans, they're like, oh, no sanctions that will harm our economies because we're reliant upon Russia for fuel and natural resources and stuff. Well, then get used to Russian aggression, I suppose. If that's what you're worried about, they're going to get a lot more aggressive now that they realize they got you in a chokehold because you're fucking cowards. People like Angela Merkel, people like Macron. They're cowards. They don't know how to respond to this. They're relying on the U.S. to defend them, and then they want to defame us constantly when we do get involved. As for Syria, though, we need to leave the Russians and the Syrian military alone. Why are we not solely focusing on ISIS? This is a bit of a blot on Trump's foreign policy. Now, the neocons will love it. Some of the Democrats will give it a pass and say, oh, well, at least it's not Russian collusion or something. They'll call it a false flag. They'll say that he shook the hand of Putin and said, oh, let me kill one fighter jet off so that these people back off and we'll work together or something. That's probably what they'll say. I don't agree with it, though. I don't think we should be involved at all in Syria. If we're going to involve ourselves at all, we should be giving weapons to Assad. We should say, sorry, Assad, we realize you're the lesser of all evils. We're just going to fucking fund you. Now, we don't care if you build this pipeline that bypasses Saudi control or, through Iraq or something, which is probably the reason we got involved in the first place, sort of the oil war stuff, that and the grand chessboard. What are we accomplishing in Syria? ISIS is still there. Most of the big pushes against them, they're coming from Assad and the Russians, they're not coming from us. We're bombing the occasional ISIS outpost. It's helpful. Mostly, though, we're still dicking around with the FSA. Trump has withheld a lot of the aid that we were giving to them before. And that's good. That's a good thing about his foreign policy. Backing off support for them and focusing more on ISIS. It's a good thing. We need to do it more. We need to go all in on the subject, and we need to chase ISIS around in these other countries. But in order to do that, we have to diplomatically get the permission of these other countries. We can't simply keep ignoring sovereign entities like Assad or tribal entities that might be willing to work with us like you have in Libya or Afghanistan, and ignoring Russia, which is a potential juggernaut of a fucking partner in the war, if you want to actually wage a war on terror instead of a war for terror like Bush started. If we want to do those things, we need to change up our strategy. It'll be cheaper, a hell of a lot cheaper to operate when all of these state and quasi-state actors are on your side and say, oh, well, the United States is doing something good. They're working with the Russians. We don't have a problem with them either. We're going to let them come in and do their business. Wouldn't that be, maybe they'll give us some weapons. It'd be wonderful. And we should probably think twice about giving them to too many tribal groups, as we saw with the Mujahideen maybe back in the 1970s and 80s. Our strategy there has completely fallen apart. But I can remember when Obama wanted to use missile strikes on Assad's forces. And Trump comes in and he very visibly does that to one air base as the result of some Syrian actions. And then says, okay, well, that's enough. I've proved my point. I'm better than Obama. I've got balls of steel and, dick around, big ego sort of crap. I guess that's great for diplomatic purposes, but it didn't accomplish anything. What are we doing in Syria? Honestly, if we're not going to work with the state actors that are there, if we're going to perturb Iran and dick around trying to intimidate Assad, which isn't going to work anyway because he's shielded by Russia, and piss off the Russians, how are we supposed to accomplish anything in Syria other than making the situation 10 times worse? And it's not like some people say, well, the U.S. likes to degrade sovereign entities to keep them weak so that they have to work with us, we can sort of enslave them. That particular sort of conspiratorial line of reasoning might sound good for Iraq. It might sound good for Afghanistan. In Syria, though, Russia's already there. They've already got, the Syrian army has Russian anti-missile systems. Iran has tens of thousands of troops now drawn up on the border of Iraq. It has troops, special forces in Syria. It wouldn't make any sense because we're obviously not going to be able to destabilize. If we were to get rid of Assad, Iran might just take over Syria. Okay, it's ours now. We're working with the Iraqi Shia majority. We're just going to take over in Syria. We're going to maintain order. What are we supposed to do? Attack the Iranians? That'd be about the worst fucking mistake we could possibly make. Yeah, Iran would go down easy. We could take them out. Russia would be involved. They're going to let you destabilize Iran. And so long as Iran is there, the Iranians aren't going to let you destabilize the Syrians. And even if they were ambivalent, Russian forces are there. Are we fucking crazy about dropping bombs near Russia's own troops? It'd be like if Russia decided that some Eastern European country if they decided, well, you know, these Estonians over there, that's really our land. We don't like the people in charge. We're just going to drop a bomb on their capital. Meanwhile, it causes a bunch of injuries to U.S. forces. It would be fucking suicidal. It'd cause at least a nuclear scenario on the order of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the weapons are hot and ready and, you know, basically give us the little red button, just press it and we'll fire. A situation like that could get worse. It could be an active exchange. That's the sort of thing we have to look forward to if we keep up this Cold War crap. It's not working. It's not making the world safer. If the idea is to make Syria or wherever safer, it's not working. If the idea is economic in nature, it's not working. If the idea is diplomatic, it's pissing off some of our allies and certainly pissing off other people we could work with. We're not accomplishing anything here. We're not even making money for like U.S. arms dealers. We're not even really selling arms because of the issue, other than we have a deal, I guess, now with Qatar after Trump came out and said, well, they're a state sponsor of terror, but we're going to sell them $15 billion in weapons. By the way, I don't have a problem with that, as Saudi Arabia is the big funder of terrorism. Saudi Arabia and Iran are the juggernauts of the Islamic world, and Turkey. And Turkey represents the quasi-secular force that nonetheless now is a dictatorship. It looks a lot more like Saddam's Iraq now than anything else. Erdogan is basically the next Saddam Hussein. Now, and by the way, people are going to have a big problem with that 10 years down the road. He's not going to relinquish power. He'll be in that position till the day he dies. If it looks like he's going to lose an election or something, he'll suspend it, implement a state of emergency, and he'll have some random people conduct a couple bombings. Oh, I can't leave now. Postponing for a couple of years. Oh, I can't leave now. Yeah, there was a flood. I have to stay on as the ultimate glorious dictator of Turkey, or something like that. Meanwhile, we should be working with most of the other sane nations in the region. Syria is one of them. Bad as Assad may be, he's one of the saner people in the Middle East. Can you fucking imagine that? A lot more sane than the people in ISIS. And we keep focusing on his forces. I think that's a bad thing to do. That's about all. Peace out.